We are on week 3. We are wrapping up this series on the book of Jonah. If it's your first time here, or you've been traveling, or you're just catching up, like I'm going to tell us where we've been so far. We'll be fine with this. But I wish that the series lasted longer, because I could preach on this all the time. But it's a short book. It's an Old Testament book. It's only 4 chapters, named after Jonah, who is an Old Testament prophet. And let me catch you up to speed. God tells Jonah to go to Nineveh. Nineveh's in modern-day Iraq, a major city of the Assyrian Empire. And he says, I want you to preach against them and basically tell them that I want to offer my mercy to them if they'll just repent and follow me. Jonah doesn't want to, for a variety of reasons. They're terrible people, and they are enemies of the Hebrew people. And so he tries to flee from God. He gets on a ship, goes in the opposite direction. The ship encounters a supernatural storm. Jonah tells the sailors, hey, if you throw me overboard, the storm stops. They do. He's about to drown. The Lord provides a fish. He has what we called last week a belly of the whale moment, a moment where everything stops, everything slows down, and the Lord gets your attention. And that at that time, God can use the situation that you're in for his glory if you allow it. And he has this moment, and he comes to the Lord and says, okay, whatever you want of me, God, I'll do it. The fish comes, spits him up, vomits him onto the shore. He leads a revival. It is the greatest revival in the history of the world. 100% of the people in the city get saved. We ended our time last week with the end of chapter 3, which I said was Act 2. Act 1 is chapter 1. Act 2 is chapters 2 and 3. And then today we're going to cover chapter 4, which is Act 3. But I want to end it with the very last verse from last week, Jonah 3, verse 10. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. What a great way to end it. He preaches a sermon, they all get saved. God doesn't destroy the city like he said he was going to. You know, Porky Pig comes up and says, but that's all, folks. Like, it's a great time to end it. But then there's chapter 4, and listen to verse 1 of chapter 4. This change of plans greatly upset Jonah, and he became very angry. This is a record scratch moment where you're like, what? What? Why would you be angry? You're batting 1,000 here. Listen to what happens as Jonah turns into what I call the pouting prophet. Listen to this. This entire rant he's about to say, I picture my 10-year-old girl, my daughter, who says this with her arms crossed and she's stomping her feet. Listen to what Jonah says. This is crazy to me. This is a plot twist. I did not see this coming. Jonah became very angry, so he complained to the Lord about it. Listen to this. Didn't I say before I left home that you would do this, Lord? This is why I ran away to Tarshish. I knew that you were a merciful and compassionate God, slow to anger and filled with unfailing love. You are eager to turn your back from destroying people. What a weird thing to get mad about. This is why most preachers, when they preach on Jonah, they finish at chapter 3. They don't go into chapter 4 because it gets messy. Just kill me now, Lord. I'd rather be dead than alive if what I predicted will not happen. Have you ever had a child who's like mouthing off or says the wrong thing to the wrong parent or the wrong person, and you're like, they're not the one to say that to? God is not the one to say, just kill me now. Wrong person. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If I were God and somebody was complaining about something I did, I would just turn the oxygen off for about 30 seconds, just enough to see you turn blue. And then I would turn it on and be like, what were you saying? Be thankful I'm not God. He's pouting. He's mad that God didn't destroy the city. And listen to what the Lord says. Verse 4. The Lord replied, is it right for you to be angry about this? Like, what's your problem? So why? That's the question. Why is Jonah mad about this? Why would he be angry that the city all repented and now are following the Lord, from the littlest one to the king? Why? There's some complications historically to this. We talked about that Nineveh was part of the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire was on the rise. They were enemies of the Hebrew people. In fact, odds are that somebody that God just saved probably did something terrible to people that Jonah loves. There's a little bit of racism in there. I think there's a little bit of the fear of him knowing that God used him to bless the enemy of his people and to save a nation that would be against his nation. That wouldn't be easy to deal with and have that be your legacy. I think maybe there's a chance that he knew that they were an empire on the rise, and they're going to be major contributors to the downfall, the small portion of the downfall of the Israelite people. Like the Assyrians are going to be doing even worse things to them. And Jonah's the one that was the instrument of their salvation. That would be difficult. Imagine for a moment the person who's done the worst thing to you and your family. And you have to be the one who God says, I'm going to use you to bless them. It will be difficult. John Calvin, he added something interesting. He said that he believes that also Jonah was upset because he lost credibility with the people, because he showed up and said, in 40 days there's going to be judgment, and he's going to destroy this city. And then God didn't do it. And so he's either incapable or ignorant. And that maybe there's an element of pride there of like, why'd you even have me tell them that if you didn't do it? Now I look stupid. I think also, by the way, something that Jonah is struggling with is something that you and I struggle with, even if you don't want to admit it. And it's this unwritten thing that we have written down, really unwritten, these rules, this scale that I call the sin scale. It's this thing that man has made that doesn't exist, in which we tell ourselves that some sins are worse than others. I needed a graphic of some sort to show this to you, so I found the most sophisticated one I could find. Here is the graphic for the sin scale. And I want you to, I just have to preach to the level of my intelligence. Just go with it. I want you to look at this for just a moment, all right? Somebody told me, this is what'd they say in first and second service? They knew the name of this, like a samurai space warrior or something like that. Does anybody have the courage to admit they know who this is? None of you. Okay. So I was told that. I recognize G.I. Joe, Stormtrooper, looks like maybe an Orange Master Chief, Spartan. I get some of those. But I want you to look at this for just a moment, and I want to attach a deep, deep, deep biblical truth to this. Here it is that you and I believe that some sins are big uns and therefore require longer repentance, or dealing with it longer, or deal with ramifications of it, and some sins are just small little ones that they're inconsequential, they don't matter as much. This is an invisible sin scale that you and I create. I also find it interesting, church, that the sins that are in our lives, you and I, whatever you have in your life, we have the tendency to put that on the bottom part of the sin scale. And then the other people, I find it interesting, men, that we see people and that we judge people who have sexual sin in their lives as if they're big uns, but then when we happen to have a pornography addiction, we think that those are small little ones. We minimize what's in our lives. I find it interesting, ladies, that we take the people who are coming out of recovery or struggling with the addiction of some sort, and we think those are the big uns, but then at the same time, we have gossip and disunity in our lives, and we act as if those are the small ones. So I believe that Jonah is wrestling with the Ninevites are terrible people, and salvation should be more difficult for them. They should have to pay for what they've done, and you're just going to walk in, God, and just forgive them? The title of today's message is The Gospel is Unfair. Because it's unfair. And that's what I want us to look at over the next few minutes, is that Jonah turns into the pouting prophet because he says, that's not fair. As if you really want what's fair. Verse 5. Jonah had gone out and sat down at a place east of the city, where he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord provided, underline that word, it's the same word in Hebrew that was used about the fish. The Lord provided, appointed, gave. Then the Lord provided a leafy plant and made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head, to ease his discomfort. And Jonah was very happy about the plant. It's the first time we hear that Jonah's happy about anything. He's a curmudgeon, apparently. He's not happy about a single thing. How can you be unhappy that God just saved an entire city, but you're happy when the plant grew and provided shade? You want to know why? Because the shade benefited him. Now, I want to show you a visual representation of what this looks like. This, by the way, is a fake plant from the hallway. Funny story, my first 2 months here, I watered this. It's a true story. I know. And look, it's still alive today. It looks beautiful. But anyways, I'm going to sit down next to it, and I'm either going to tear a hamstring or tear a skinny jean, and we're going to find out together. Oh, I haven't sat down crisscross applesauce in years. Hey, that was pretty good, actually. I'm doing better than I think I am. Thank you. Hold the cat calls, please. It's inappropriate. So Jonah is sitting in front of what it says that he made himself a tent or some sort of structure. Most likely, this is what we call a sukkot, S-U-K-K-O-T. This would have been something that Hebrews would have been very familiar with. They had an entire festival of tabernacles based upon it. So he builds himself this thing. He sits under it. He's sitting on the hill looking down at the city. Think the Michael Jackson meme where he's eating the popcorn. He's ready to watch the show because God is going to destroy the city just like he said he was. And when it doesn't happen, he's mad. And then God makes a vine grow. It probably didn't look like this fake plant. It most likely was a castor vine. Here's a modern day picture of what this would have looked like. Some people say that it may have had gourds. Here's a picture of that. And it may have gourds. It may look, this is kind of more of a modern one, just to give you an idea. So it grows up quick and it hangs over the top of him, and he's happy. And he should be happy because the average temperature in Mesopotamia is about 100 degrees at this time, which sounds pretty nice right now, to be honest. I hope you Christmas people are happy. Like, I'm sick and tired of hearing you people in September that you're like, I can't wait till Christmas. It's going to be, and I'm like, no, it's dark at 4:30. I'm lethargic like I've never been. I'm going to be double the weight coming out of hibernation, and it's freezing outside. So I hope you Christmas people are happy. I wasn't even in the notes. So Jonah is sitting under this tree, and he's happy for the very first time. But he falls into the same trap that you and I fall into sometimes. It's called the entitlement trap. When we say, that's not fair. Recently, this last couple of weeks, I was really upset because my property taxes increased dramatically. And I was not happy. And I was complaining about it. And then I was complaining because I had to go out and mow the yard one last time because my neighbor's leaves keep coming into my yard. I hope you're watching, neighbor. And it's funny. And I was complaining because I'm like, dang, man, this takes me forever to push mow this yard. And all of these things were happening together, and I thought to myself, man, I am complaining because the Lord has provided finances for me to have the nicest home I've ever lived in. And because it went up in value, I have to pay more taxes, and I'm mad about it. And yeah, I don't like to give my money away, especially to the government, but I have the money to do it, and that comes from the Lord. And I'm complaining because my yard is so big. Man. Sometimes it's not physical things that we complain about. Sometimes it's situations of life. And I don't mean to minimize this, but sometimes things happen to us that are not fair. Sometimes people are in a season of infertility, and they see people that don't even follow the Lord, and they have babies they don't even want. And it's not fair. You and I, no doubt, have experienced loss of some sort. And it's like, man, that person I cared about died. Yet these people that don't even know you, Lord, all their family's still alive. And I got to bury a loved one. That's not fair. It's not fair. The gospel is unfair. And God's story with the Ninevites is over for now, but he's not done with Jonah yet. That's why chapter 4 is there. He's going to perform some heart surgery. And what I love about the Bible is it includes all of these things that if you and I were writing our story, we probably would leave out. Like I was talking to somebody in between services about King David. If King David, they could have left all of the things out that he did that were terrible. They could have. They could have just done all of the great things that he did in the military, but they included it. Why? So that you and I can have hope, so that we can relate, so that we can see that God uses broken, imperfect people all the time. What I showed you right here wasn't nearly as good as this graphic, but here's a graphic of an artist's rendition of what Jonah would have looked like sitting there, just ready. Unhappy. Now let me tell you what God's about to do. He's about to make Jonah angry, angrier, angriest, because he's trying to show him a point of how ridiculous it is of what he's happy about and what he isn't happy about. I can relate to this because I grew up with a sister named Holly, and she had the worst temper ever. And I exploited that as her sibling every day. I would go into her room, I would get her mad, get her all riled up, and then just sit back and watch her implode and be like, yes, yeah. And there was one time I went in there, I'll never forget, and then I made her mad, and she kicked something, and when she did, her toenail pushed back a little bit, and then she got really mad at that, and she said words that would make a sailor blush, and then she went over, and she punched something, and what she punched broke, and then my mom comes storming down the hallway, what are you doing? And she got grounded, and she's just having this meltdown, and I'm sitting there as her brother in the room next door just listening to all of it in the wall. And I'm like, yes, this is kind of what God's going to do to Jonah. Check this out. Verse 7. But at dawn the next day, God provided, there's that word again, a worm which chewed the plant, and it withered away. He's so happy about it. Now watch what's going to happen. How do you think Jonah's going to handle this? Spoiler alert, not well. Here's a picture of what they say this type of worm probably looked like, kind of a caterpillar type of a worm-looking thing. It is capable of eating an entire plant in a day. You're lucky if you only have one of those. It's about to get worse. Watch this, verse 8. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind. He turned it up. And the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. He wanted to die and said, it would be better for me to die than to live. But God said to Jonah, is it right for you to be angry about the plant? It is, he said, and I'm so angry I wish I were dead. But the Lord said, you have been concerned about this plant, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. And should I not have more concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left hand, and also many animals? That's a strange phrase to say. So we said historians have this at around 600,000 people. But if you'll notice this phrase, that cannot tell their right hand from their left hand, it's most likely talking about innocent people, children, babies, infants. And he's saying, you are more happy when there was a small little thing and you're mourning its loss rather than celebrating that 120,000 innocent people have been saved? What is wrong with you? What is your perspective? Where are your priorities? I've told some of you this before. Well, perspective is so important. It's so important. Because it's easy to say, man, it's not fair, God, that you asked this of me, or that I'm going through this, and we completely neglect the things that God has done. That's also not fair. One of the hardest parts of us moving here 4.5 years ago to serve this church, maybe the hardest part, it will be hard for the rest of my life, was looking at my 86-year-old grandma who lived in the mother-in-law quarters at our home and telling her that we've lived together and next door to each other for 10 years and we're moving. to look at my daughters in the eye and say, I know you see your great-grandma multiple times every single day, and now you're probably going to see her once every 2 months if you're lucky. It's really hard to look at my 86-year-old grandma in the eyes and say, your home that you've lived in, we have to sell. And you're probably going to have to get a rental home or an apartment at 86 years old. It's not fair. It's not fair. But my grandma, her husband was a preacher. She's been following the Lord for over 8 decades. And her response had the wisdom of somebody who's walked with the Lord a long time. She says, Jason, this is the life of a preacher. When you give your life to the Lord, you can't have parameters. You can't say, I'll do this, but not that. She said, I'm thankful that it's a 90-minute drive and not a plane ticket. Perspective. She said, and while I've enjoyed living next to you for 10 years, and we'll lose it, she said, I'm going to look at it like what a gift that we've spent the last 10 years living next door to each other. Do you know how many grandparents would love to live next door to their great-grandchildren for 10 years? What a gift. Perspective. I think that's what God's trying to give Jonah right here. What's really interesting is that that's the end of the book. Like, it literally ends like that. It's so anticlimactic. You note takers that like the clean endings like a Hallmark movie, you're going to hate this. There's no second Jonah. It ends in this weird way. I read this book called The Judgment of Jonah. It wasn't that great of a book, but this is a cool quote from it, so I saved you about 3 hours. Listen to this quote. The book of Jonah has no conclusion, and the final question of the book has no answer, except from the one who realizes the fullness of the mercy of God. What's interesting about it is that Jonah wrote this, and he left it open-ended on purpose. And you and I are left knowing that God uses broken people, that God chastised Jonah for his selfish moment, and yet his mercy is woven throughout all of it. I think Jonah's having a hard time with forgiveness. Forgiveness is really hard. It's tough. I wish forgiveness wasn't in the Bible. Listen to what Jesus said, Matthew 5:44. He says, but I tell you, love your enemies. Anybody wish they had spiritual whiteout? They could just take that out of there. Pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's not fair. I remember when my youngest daughter, Callie, and those of you that know Callie will not find this surprising at all, when she was like talking about salvation and following God, and we were talking about as a family, I wanted to talk a little more with her about what it means to actually, what a life looks like following Jesus. We focus with young people and even with people, that we're trying to have evangelism with, we focus on the salvation part, but we do not let them know the cost and how their life should look different as followers of Jesus. Salvation we focus on, but we completely ignore sanctification. And so I was wanting to tell my daughter about what this looks like following God. And we're trying to tell her. And we tell her, like, hey, you got to bless those people who are mean to you. You got to pray for those people who persecute you and your family. And I remember all of this was fine until she came down the hallway after one of the services. It was a church I was the campus pastor at. And she came back and said that there was a kid who took her goldfish. Now in kids ministry, man, that's a big deal. Steal my wallet, no big deal. Call me names. Goldfish? Some fighting terms, man. And she was so sad. And my paternal instincts kick in, and I'm like, what is this boy's name? I run this place. He's deflocked, man. He's out of here. And my wife, in her wisdom, said, hey, we can show her what we were just talking about. If you're going to follow Jesus, you got to pray for the people that steal your goldfish. And so she tells Callie this. And Callie's like, so if I follow Jesus, I got to pray for the bullies? yes, honey. She goes, I'm not interested. And she was serious. She didn't get saved for 2 more years, man. She's like her mama. Have you ever been around somebody who has unforgiveness in their heart? Have you ever been around somebody that has the victim mentality and they're angry about all the things that have been done wrong to them? They're miserable people to be around. If you are that way, I'm here to tell you what no one else will tell you. You are miserable to be around. Welcome to Center Point Church. Forgiveness is for you. It's a gift. Unforgiveness is you drinking poison hoping it kills the other person. Forgiveness is a gift. Do you want to know why forgiveness is a gift? Because it lets God be God. It's saying, I'm taking this. It was wrong to me. It was done wrong to me. It's not okay, but I'm putting this in the hands of God. I'm backing away and trusting that God will be God. And Jonah is wrestling with this unforgiveness because he wants them to pay for it a little bit. The gospel is unfair. Let me give you some little perspective. For those of you that are entering this holiday season, and it's going to be difficult because this is your first lap of losing a loved one, and you think it is unfair. I'm here to tell you that it is unfair. It's also unfair that Jesus died and said, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and one day you will be reunited with that person. And that will last forever. That is equally unfair. But sometimes unfair is exactly what you want. You don't want it to be fair. Some of you have bought into the lie that just because you don't sin as much as other people, that you deserve heaven. You don't deserve heaven. You deserve hell. Once again, welcome to Center Point Church. But it's beautiful because even in the middle of my mess, God can save a wretch like me. And God pursues broken people. It's really hard to wrap your mind around the idea that the person who has done the most wrong to you ever, that God is pursuing them as equally as he's pursuing you. What if he wants to use you as an instrument of mercy to someone who has wronged you? That's not easy. I want to end our time today by looking at this thing I read about a year ago on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. I read this. I don't know who posted it. I don't know where it came from, but it haunted me. I took a screenshot of it, and it's ruined my life for the last 365 days. So as a benevolent person, I am going to now ruin your life with it. But my gosh, it's powerful. Look at this tweet right here. It says, the Apostle Paul entered heaven hearing the cheers of those he martyred. That's how the gospel works. Wow. Wow. Scandalous forgiveness. You and I are people of hope. We're people of forgiveness because we know what we have been forgiven of. Would you stand with me? The beautiful part is it's all unfair. It's not natural, it's supernatural. What I want to do is today, as we end our time, I want you to look at things as you leave through the perspective of the goodness of God. Rather than what has happened to you or what you lost, look at it from the perspective of that God has a purpose for you. And if you are breathing, there is a purpose. He is not finished. He is not finished. And for those of you that are mourning the loss of someone this holiday season, know that we are hanging on the hope that we will be reunited forever. And now you and I are hope dealers. We are messengers of that hope. So while you are breathing, tell everyone what you have been forgiven of, and let's be quick to forgive. For those of you that have not given your life to the Lord, Paul says in Romans that if you declare with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus died for your sins and rose again, you shall saved. Life is short. Eternity is long. You are not promised tomorrow. Don't miss that chance.
Thank you so much for watching this video. It truly is an honor to be able to spend a little bit of time with you. I want to encourage you, if you want to keep up with all of the latest things going on at Centerpoint Church, you can subscribe to this channel. You can hit that bell for alerts so that you won't miss anything. And most importantly, if this impacted you in any way, I want to hear about it. We want to celebrate with you. We want to serve you. So if you go to centerpointtn.com, click on Contact Us, and we can't wait to get connected with you.